expert here. Wrap it up. Okay, I am gonna try and stop share here. I don't actually need to share. Yeah, okay, there we go. Perfect. Okay. Well, we've talked a lot today, sir. So, let me introduce what we talked about as an introduction to you, because you can kind of help us wrap it all up. So our first speaker was Cassandra, what's her last name? You guys can talk much better with first names. Ramsey. She's a local lawyer who does sports law, and she gave us this history of the cases, basically that NIL was approved, and then California and Florida just went with it in laws, but there's cases now that people want back pay for NIL. There's cases to get student athletes, which she pointed out is a term because workers' comp, it was to avoid workers' comp, so student athletes. Anyway, to get student athletes, student employee wages, there's the vote for unionization at Dartmouth basketball, but Dartmouth hasn't done anything with it yet. And I tried to summarize what all she said, but it was really illuminating. And then we talked with NCAA, and it seems like they basically, the Power Four now are called the autonomous FBS, and they get double the votes of all the other schools at the NCAA, but we don't know what'll happen going forward there. But there's a lot of good intentions and hope there, and they wanted to be very clear for all of us that they only get the money from the basketball tournament. That is their money, and did they say 60% goes back to the schools? Yeah. So they wanted us to make sure we knew that, understood it, and shared it out, because there's, as you can imagine. So, they're looking at lots of things, but they don't have as much power as they used to have. And Ben's still with us here. So that's, we'd like some oversight of all these changes and stuff. And so really that would be the organization to do it. Anyway, then we talked with 3 of the Power 4 schools, one of the group of 5, and then an HBCU. And we talked about all the different things like health and safety, employee status. Nobody's thinking about employee status yet. You don't have to. Everybody's thinking about NIL. Right now it's all the boosters, but it might move into the schools with some, I guess, legal cases doing that. Everybody's trying to provide enough health care for their athletes. And I think everybody's kind of worried about Title IX and Olympic sports, because if they have to pay off past amounts, schools could go, I don't know if a state institution can go bankrupt, but I know, well, a state can. So, people are worried about that. So then we had a really interesting talk beginning of the afternoon about sports gambling. And there's going to be some legislation apparently coming out from, what's his name? Yeah. Tonko, Senator Tonko. Yes, Congressman. So to make sure that there is confirmation of available funding, stop the advertising to impressionable youth, etc. So legislation, but I wasn't sure why it was only from Tonko's office. I mean, if it's really going to work, it should be. Anyway, that was just my impression. Oh, Blue Moon. Okay, that's better. And then we were just talking about athletic trainers and how really we need to have a more patient-centered approach to our athletes so that they can walk in the door and get the care they need, not wait for their athletic trainer from their team. And that we need to have, better pay for athletic trainers, more of them, more support, and they should not be under the athletic department. They should be independent. So here we are, a bunch of faculty. And I've asked everybody today, well, we didn't ask, well, anyway, what can we do as faculty? And we've heard advocate, make sure the myths are gone about things, look at our academic policies, make sure that they are good for everybody. And that includes watching graduation rates, and then facilitating transfer credits so people don't risk their graduation because they're transferring, because the portal is wide open. And then alert faculty senate to the sports betting problems, because we had no idea. They're just taking every dollar they can, whether it's confirmed as available or not, from people who are very susceptible. We should follow our budgets, have internal review. We should make sure that athletes are part of the institution, embedded in student activities, hold the athletic department responsible for things. And I did not know we could be on an NCAA committee.
Yes.
I feel pretty stupid, but we're gonna ask Ben for a list of committees that we can be on, and we should be on them.
Yes.
So anyway, there's so much going on. NIL, if our college pays money, can we even afford it? The employment question, the health and safety with the gambling, with the concussions, with the mental health needs. You know, there's just so much going on. So we wanted to get your input on all this. And in case you don't know, this is Congressman, right? Former Congressman Tom McMillan from Lead One now? Yes. Okay. Yeah. So
maybe I'll give a little background. So I was a college athlete, and I been involved in college athletics a long time. I was elected to Congress right from the NBA. I was in the NBA 11 years. Actually, I went from the University of Maryland where I played basketball, and then I went to Oxford on a Rhodes Scholarship, came back, was in the NBA 11 years, and I actually ran for Congress when I was in the NBA. So it's pretty.
good idea. That's job stability.
No one's actually ever done that. I don't think they ever will. But you know, I barely won. I won. Represented Annapolis, that whole area over there by the bay, and I served 3 years, 3 terms. And when I was there, we actually passed, myself, Bill Bradley, and other congressmen, the first pure college sports bill, which was the disclosing of graduation rates, called the Student Right to Know bill. And today, the disclosure of graduation rates is sort of like,
And they've gone up because of that.
well, I think it's the whole idea back then was to it's called the federal graduation rate, was to force this disclosure so that parents and student athletes could know as a consumer item how schools are doing. When we introduced that legislation, the NCAA fought it, believe it or not. They thought it was intrusive. So ironic today, that was intrusive. Today, they want the government to solve their problems. But back then, they fought it. And the reason why we passed it was there was a crisis. Dexter Manley, a former Ohio State football player, came up to the Hill and testified that he couldn't read or write, but he was yet finishing up his career at Oklahoma State. So that galvanized the passage of the bill. I also, when I was in Congress, submitted a bill that was based on my work on the Knight Commission. I was a founding member of the Knight Commission. So I introduced this antitrust bill, which was the first antitrust bill to give the NCAA antitrust protection with respect to television rights, so we could reverse the 1984 Supreme Court decision. And the reason I did that was because I had known Whizzer White, the justice who was the Rhodes Scholar, Heisman Trophy winner, who wrote the minority dissent on the 84 decision, as you know, which broke the NCAA. And I always thought his arguments were very pervasive in that the bill that I put in back then was, look, no one's going to take this seriously for 25 years, but I think a conditional antitrust. Okay, we'll give you an antitrust, but here's what you got to do. And then here's what you gotta do, what included, you know, Title IX and giving stipends to players. I mean, this is 31 years ago, so to spread money around for academic success and to incentivize schools to have more teams, not less teams, or more opportunities. So it was a very higher ed oriented bill. And so I was on the Knight Commission, served on for 10 years. I became a presidential appointee under Clinton. I headed up the President's Council on Physical Fitness and Sports. But I've always been involved in college sports. When I was in Congress, I wrote a book called Out of Bounds, which talked about all these issues. And so more recently, I was selected to head up an organization called Lead One. We work primarily with the athletic departments on the 134 schools in the FBS on all these various issues. So I just came from a board meeting at the University of Maryland system. I'm on the board. I've been on it before, but I didn't think I was going to make it today in person because I thought our meeting would drag on. And a lot of the reason why it was dragging on was because we had a major Title IX sexual misconduct issue at one of our institutions. And so I'm very involved in all those issues. But let me, first of all, Kelly, thank you for the chance to come here today. I mean, where I think, let me give you the lay of the land as faculty, because I understand your role and I understand shared governance. I've been on, 2 university boards, the Naval Academy and University of Maryland board for over 15 years. So I've been around higher ed. My sister happens to be probably one of the most important people in higher ed. She is the executive editor of the Chronicle for Higher Education. So
Yeah.
My sister has been the editor and now she's the executive editor. But so it kind of runs in my family a little bit, if you will. What's interesting about college sports today, if we just had to take a snapshot, all these cases, all the antitrust lawyers are just grabbing all over it, really because of the money. They can talk out altruistically, but it's about money. And we've allowed this system to grow where coaches are making so much money. I remember in 1990, we had a hearing when I was in Congress, and the first $1 million coach was coming around the pike. And I said, in the hearing, I said, we're soon going to have $1 million player. Well, we now have them today, 30 years later, but it was inevitable. And the idea that you can pay one side of the labor management equation, you're not going to get pressure from the other side. It's just ridiculous. Even though the scholarship has a value and all of that, it's very paternalistic. And so everybody, in the Congress, if you look at the Congress, even though the general public, 55% of the American people are against employment status, I would say in the Congress, it's actually a little higher than I think 60% of the Congress would be against employment status. But the problem is that 40%. And to try to get a bill done when there's such a strong minority that believes the student athletes should have commensurate rights, really as coaches, it's very difficult. And so, so I had a fundraiser this week for Cory Booker. And Cory Booker, as you may know, is a senator from New Jersey, Rhodes Scholar, played football at Stanford. And we had a lot of college sports people. Matter of fact, Charlie Baker flew down to this event because Cory is in the middle. He's trying to figure this out. Let me tell you where it is. So Ted Cruz, the senator from Texas, who's in a tough re-election race, basically is giving college sports everything they want. Antitrust protection, non-employment status, national preemption on NIL. It's the wish list that every college athletic director and president would want. On the other side, you've got Democrats like Chris Murphy and Senator Blumenthal who are strongly in favor of unionization, employment, and collective bargaining. So Cory's been tasked with negotiating with Booker. Now, it's pretty hard to find a compromise between non-employment and employment, non-unionization and unionization. And on the Democratic side, you've got enormous power from the unions. Unions are extremely powerful in the union in the Democratic Party, and they are ascendant across the country. Unions are stronger here now than they were 10 years ago. So, the Democrats would love to see, a lot of Democrats would love to see unionization employment. I don't think there's a president of a university in America that wants to see unionization. And I can only tell you, having been a board member at Maryland a few years ago and today, the biggest difference between my 2 times in service on that board is that collective bargaining is so much bigger today than it was when I was on the board before. And so in certain states, that's growing. But the problem is, how do you have an employment model where you have right to work laws in Alabama and you've got very pro-labor laws in Ohio? It's very hard. Some states, they don't even allow public employees to unionize. It's a total wrecking ball that would be very difficult to have a national sort of standard for college sports with all these various standards. And we start going into the Fair Labor Act and all those bills about minimum wage, and you're dealing with exempt and non-exempt workers. It's extraordinarily complicated, and it will make every president in this country have gray hair like me by the time they finish their job. So what's the answer? I think the answer is there's a lot of pressure being put on the system by the court cases. You've got, as you heard, the Johnson case in Pennsylvania, which is a fair labor minimum wage standard. You've got the National Labor Relations Board's cases in California and Dartmouth. And then you have, of course, the House case, which is not directly related to employment, but it could lead to that because the House case is saying, oh, you're giving athletes NIL. Well, let's go backwards, figure out what it is retroactively. And they're using a formula of 10% of the TV money, say, okay, that's really the pot of money that should go to these athletes. The problem is that that pot of money was generated 96% by male athletes. And, the complication in all this is Title IX. Because if you're going to say, okay, this is $1.3 billion case, tripled to $4 billion plus, and we're going to pay it out largely to male athletes, you're going to have some Title IX tigers to wrestle with. And matter of fact, NCAA even filed a brief in these cases saying, this is you got Title IX. And Judge Wilkins, who's the judge on this case, knows very little about college sports. She knows the antitrust law, and Kessler could care less. Kessler just wants Jeffrey Kessler, the plaintiff's lawyer, just wants a check. So the answer really is, and I think we'll get here, I think there's 3 big things that have to be done in college sports. And Kelly, I hope I'm going down the path you want me to do, but the first was what you talked about originally about sports betting. Sports betting is the existential threat to colleges and universities across this country. And you're seeing more and more of it in the paper. But if you talk to the compliance people, there's 100% probability of a major gambling scandal within the next 3 years. It's probably already occurring. We just are not getting it. But you see states starting to ban prop bets and all that prop bets are the bets. If Tom's going to make that free throw or whatever, they're the easiest to manipulate because I go to you and I say, you shoot 5 free throws a game, just miss your second. That's all I ask you, miss your second. And, it's almost impossible to detect. It's so quick that this is going on. Now, states can ban it, but that doesn't mean you get rid of the risk because the market will just go back underground, which it was for years. And so this is extremely difficult situation. And we need, believe it or not, we need national legislation. And there was an attempt a few years ago to pass a national sports betting bill. I put that at the highest top of the list because I can tell you this, and you work with presidents, presidents are worried about things that get them fired. Sports betting scandal on their campus will get them fired. Now, it didn't in Iowa, it didn't in Iowa State recently, because those were, they weren't catastrophic, but you get something that's really big, presidents get fired. And when I say a scandal, I'm talking about scandals like in Europe where 200 teams or 20 college programs are all sort of intertwined. I'm talking about something major that shakes the foundation of higher ed. And that will definitely get Congress's attention. And also push back a lot of the commercial forces that are driving college sports. That's number one. We need a national legislation. And it was Orrin Hatch, and Chuck Schumer tried to do it, 5-6 years ago. But you need a good scandal. I mean, that's just the way Congress works. Number two, we have to come up with a model, and this is what Cory Booker's working on, a model that creates the revenue-rich programs and those athletes treated a little differently than the regular mill student athlete, whether it's D2, D3, or a whole bunch of D1 athletes, volleyball players, you name it, who don't create a lot of revenue, but who get scholarships and kind of leave them alone. Let them do NIL, but don't upset that apple cart too much. You got to deal with the big revenue sports. And the way I think you get there is through really a licensing agreement. So the House case has a sort of a pathway because you don't have to turn them into employees. You can give them a piece of the pie through a licensing agreement. In other words, the big revenue sports all have television revenue, so they can get a piece of the licensing from television for putting their name, image, and likeness up. So that way they're not employees. They're treated a little differently because they're creating a lot of revenue. But along with that, I think you got to do some other things. You got to control some of the arms race and some of the other cost out of control things. But
one question though, licensing agreement with the individual or with the group?
I'm talking about for instance, a licensing agreement it would be, like the University of Maryland gets a piece of television money.
Sure.
So the athletes would get a piece of that through a license.
But would they be individual licensing agreements? Because what I'm saying is that there's really big performers, stars. Will they get more than?
No, that's an interesting detail. And to the second part of my point.
I'm sorry.
No, because you asked a very good question. They've got to see, there are like these Screen Actor Union. I mean, they're not really employees. They're really independent contractors. But you have to have a collective bargaining mechanism, even for the women volleyball players. They should be able to sit down and say, wait a minute, where's practice? This coach is swearing too much. They should have a mechanism that they feel like they have a right to bargain. I don't think you should include the right to strike because these athletes have such temporal careers. I just think that that's not helpful to them. Anyway, I'm sort of outlining what I think could be a model where it's based on licensing and a form of collective bargaining for these athletes. And so, and of course, NIL. Now, then we turn to NIL. And NIL, you need a national standard, but it shouldn't, the question is, if you do all these things, I mean, can you really phase out recruiting inducements and other kinds of inducements? And that's really, because college sports is the only sports entity in really the world that relies on recruiting. I mean, the pros have drafts. They allocate talent through drafts, through, mechanisms where, it's not like a player chooses, like we have today, basically unrestricted free agency. And I think that system has tilted too far towards the player. The reason I say that is because, coaches, when you sign a contract for a grant aid, there should be bilateral commitment there. I don't think kids should be able to jump and leave. Because that school has invested a lot in some of these kids, they recruited them, spent all that money, and then they give them the scholarship and all that. It just seems to me kind of a crazy system that the school can put all that into them and then they have ultimate mobility. And even the coaches system is screwed up because it's nothing like the NFL. If you're an NFL coach, you cannot walk out the door and go to another team and expect a buyout to settle it all out. They just won't let you do it. They hold you to the fire on those contracts, and contracts mean nothing in college sports. They're all kind of buyout oriented. So anyway, I'm kind of getting off the point, which I'm saying, which is that you got to have a model that gives student athletes a voice, and those that have high revenue, greater equities in the system. Okay, and you do that without creating an employment model. And so that's, and the third part of my recommendation, which is more long-term, but I think it's ultimately what I've told Charlie Baker is that it goes back to the bill that I put in 1991, which is that the television structure in college sports is very inefficient. The conferences it's a very feudal system, and they all compete against each other. And the television networks just play everybody off against each other. And they gain and the colleges lose. And kind of one of the ironies of Wizard White and the 84 Supreme Court decision is that everybody kind of predicted this, that you'd have all this programming out there, and then the networks would be able to pick and choose. And the revenues are suboptimal. I mean, if you could have an NFL model, I'm not talking about playoff now because you got the college football play and the NCAA tournament. But if you could have a college, if you could have an NFL model, and you're going to increase the pie, you're going to increase the revenue, and you can do a lot more for women's sports and HBCUs and if the NFL got antitrust protection in 1961 in 2.5 months, it took them to get that through Congress. And they did it because they brought everybody to the table. Vince Lombardi, they said, come on, Vince, we'll take care of Wisconsin. I know you're a small market. And he got that done 2.5 months. If there's a place that needs an antitrust exemption, I think it's college sports. And I think that no one thinks that's even plausible today. But you hear a lot of these plans going out there about mega football conferences and so forth. Guess what? They all have to go up there, get that approval. You're not consolidating television contracts in college football without going through the sausage making process. So, which is Congress. Anyway, those are some observations. I don't know if that helps, but I do think we have to keep the academy as the academy. We can't turn it into a mini version of the NFL and NBA because I think you're going to lose a lot of the marketplace. The other thing people don't realize is that college sports is very unique. Think about Notre Dame, think about Michigan. They have goodwill going back to 1870 or whatever. They have such goodwill. So if you took the same Michigan football team and put it into a minor league team, no one would even know about it. It wouldn't even exist. It's because they're playing for Michigan. And the stickiness of college sports is extraordinary. And I don't think it's extraordinary. I don't think sometimes the athletes are getting the best of that system. Because if they went into a minor league, it would be lost. No one would know who they are. They're playing at a college and everybody knows who they are, and they expect enormous returns. And all that goes back to the point I made earlier, which is they're all driven by the coaches primarily. That compensation escalation is driven, athlete demand.
We did hear that.
There's a lot of stuff there. I didn't. And faculty need to be. First of all, you need to be. Most presidents, are not knowledgeable about college. Start there. I've worked with tons of presidents, and I would say most are not knowledgeable. Most come up the ranks through Provo. They have no business. They've never had a chance to learn it, so they don't they're not on the track that gets them in the middle of it. A lot of presidents who've been around a while pick it up and become very knowledgeable. And, but I would say the vast majority of presidents are not knowledgeable. So it's a very screwed up system because you've got the presidents who are theoretically in charge of everything. You're supposed to be in charge of the conferences and the commissioners and hire all that. You're supposed to be in charge of the athletic department, subject to their boards. But it's so fragmented. It's the most fragmented system. And when I hear members of Congress tell me that, oh, today I had the ACC come in, they came in with their lobbyists, PAC, and the SEC came in with their lobbyists. And I said, and they say to me, why can't they all get together? Like, why are we so why are they coming at me so fragmented? And not all of them have the same message. So it's a problem because of the fragmentation of college sports to get anything done, which is also a problem when we're trying to get legislation done. So, and that's kind of an overview, but faculty are key, and you really have to keep the ties to the academy. If I had to blow it all up, I would try to come in with regional scheduling. I mean, this whole scheduling thing is nonsensical. And the president of Maryland's telling me that it's having an impact on kids and their academics. There's no way. I was a chemistry major. I had labs every afternoon. If you know chemistry, it's very tough. And I couldn't have done it if I was, first of all, I'm not sure they would have, but but today, let me tell you the good news. The good news is that NIL has been a retention tool. Kids are staying in college. They're getting graduation degrees. They're getting graduate degrees. That's great. They're going to school in the summer. And so there is a real good academic result of that, which is very positive. But I do think the travel is excessive. The problem is not so much the football team because they only play a few games a year, but it's tough on the basketball players. It's certainly tough on the sports that have to fly commercial. It's really tough on them. And, I just think that system.
About a baseball schedule.
Yeah, it's crazy. I think that system could be better organized. So there's just a lot of stuff happening. I believe in the scholar athlete model. I believe in that academy tie-in, and we have to be careful not to divorce college sports from that. So, but I'm optimistic. I think Congress will get around. Everybody says, well, Congress can't do it. That's not true. Look, with all the craziness that went up there, they're going to pass a Ukrainian bill. They're going to pass aid to Israel, and they're going to pass aid to Taiwan. They're going to get that damn thing done. And it wasn't pretty, but it's getting done. And when this gets superheated, I think Congress will come in with something that I think will make it, will solve a lot of problems. So I'm an optimist, even though a lot of people think, Congress can't get anything done, but they will. They do occasionally.
Aren't you optimistic there'll be a scandal then?
Well, no, I think a scandal will happen. I think it will happen. It'll be major, and I think it'll be another galvanizing force. I just think it's almost inevitable because you cannot police it. That's the problem. And it's so easy. And with the income disparity in the locker room right now, it's not hard. The kid in the NBA that they just banned. See that story?
Yeah.
I mean, it was crazy. I mean, he was betting and even on his own team, and the NBA banned him for life. That's how serious the advantage the NBA and the NFL have, that they have more tools in college sports. They have, you go to an NFL practice arena or stadium, they have Big Brother on all those athletes. They have technologies they don't have to tell you about. They're watching those football players, basketball players. Good.
I want to get back to Brian's question. He asked you, tag on to that. So we have a team of athletes, and of course you have a quarterback and a couple more players who are outstanding, and they're going to have money. So if you look at the licensure idea, does that mean that everyone on the team gets a percentage of the NIL money? That's my question, because I've always been concerned
That's
about.
it's a good question. So when I say, so it's like the NFL. So the players, and the NFL Players Association has a master group licensing deal. And Tom Brady and the third string quarterback get the same checks, or did when he did get the same checks. So that was a group licensing across the NFL. But they can also do their own deals. Tom Brady does his own deal. He did his own deals, and great stars do their own deals. So the idea of if you were going to set up a rev share, it would probably be that's based on licensing. It would probably first has to be on the sport, because not, basketball players are generating different television than football players. And I would imagine you'd try to come up with a system like the NFL where it's pretty similar.
I'm
Pretty
also
similar.
concerned about the athlete who is not standout, but
No, I think
Because the
everybody in that kind
quarterback,
of licensing
yeah.
structure. And here's the thing, here's the irony of that. In that licensing structure, if I give $1 million to the football players, so across the board, guess what I have to do? I have to give $1 million. That pool of money, that television money, which is generated by football players, I'm gonna have to generate give $1 million to. And that's what people don't understand. People understand the Title IX complexities, and it's a powerful force. There's 150 women in Congress. They see what's happening.
So
And
you're
so,
saying that Title IX applies not just to the federal institutions, but the television contracts and everything.
Title IX applies to any kind of discrimination, sexual discrimination, period, whether it's employment or whatever. Employment is covered under Title IX. It's a very broad central. And by the way, President Biden just issued new regs today on it. I'm sure will even be more stringent. So the answer to this is that if I give $1 million out of their television money to football players, in my view, you're gonna have to give $1 million to.
But the,
Now, that could be different. That money could be spread around to all the women athletes. Doesn't have to go the same way, but the $1 million has to be similar.
but what if Fox Sports gives the boosters, well, I wouldn't give the boosters $1 million.
Collective.
If
It's a
it,
collective.
so, okay, if it gives the collective, I mean, that doesn't make
That's
any
why
difference.
Charlie Baker is trying to bring bring NIL within the institution, 'cause all the compliance. Because they have to be Title IX compliant, because a lot of collectives are operating outside that.
Yeah.
But I can guarantee you one thing, I'm pretty sure of, that if they pass a bill in Congress, they're going to probably, the collectives will not be able to operate without Title IX. Two things will happen. They'll probably be under the umbrella of Title IX, and they're gonna be taxed. They'll be taxed. And so, because a lot of the Democrats are going to say, wait a minute, those women in Congress, there's already a bill up there to basically bring the collectives within the orbit of Title IX. So and a lot of schools don't want to bring NIL within the school because it is Title IX. And there are women legislators up there saying that's not the way it should be. And so it's going to be one of those things I think it's going to be, I would be surprised if Title IX, the extension of Title IX did not cover all that.
So we were talking earlier about the fact that the collectives, the NIL will probably be assumed within the university structure. But the downfall of that was that then it would be pay to play. You could just recruit people willy-nilly.
See, that's not necessarily clear because the bills in Congress prohibit inducements and basically recruiting and transfer inducements.
That means we really need federal legislation. And I'm very heartened to hear that Cory Booker is in it, because we couldn't get a hold of his office, so we thought he was just kind of, not now.
That's
The prime.
Yeah, we thought he just dropped it, kind of.
He talked to us two years ago.
Yeah, 2 years ago, he gave us a recording, and since then, we haven't really been able to find anything out, so.
No, he's a key player.
Okay,
I
good.
think there will still be collectives, even if all this happens. But they won't have tax deductibility, and they'll probably have to comply with Title IX. My guess, I may be wrong on that, but my
Good
guess.
thing is, if it's within the university, it's not taxed. If it goes to the collective, it's taxed.
No, that's not true.
No, oh, shucks.
If the university sets up a player division, as a donor, I say, look, I want to give money to the athletic department, the general athletic, I get a write-off of that. If I say it wants to go to the players for their compensation, there will be no right, but that's not,
Okay.
well, wait a minute, athletic departments, used to be able to deduct seat licenses.
Yeah.
So there is that demarcation in. Right, you can't do it with C licenses anymore, they took that deduction. And so what the risk for college sports, the whole enterprise, or at least the ones that are the haves in the system, the risk is that Congress could come in and do more tax treatment. Like under the Trump administration, they taxed seat licenses, they said, that's no longer a deduction for you. You give money to the university, you can't deduct that anymore. And during the Trump administration, they also put a 10% surcharge on any coach's contract over 10%. But if they wanted to go and say the full bloat, they could say any contributions to basketball and football players that are making that kind of money, that paying their athletes are not tax deductible. They could say their UBIT income, unrelated business income. They could also say none of the contributions at all are deductible. So, the IRS, the IRS is someone you have to keep your eye on because college sports gets too far away from the academy. They're going to be dealing with the IRS. That's always a risk. So
yesterday, Bryant, what was his first name? Arthur Bryant was at the Drake Group. He brought up an interesting.
Oh, yeah.
Idea when we started talking about, men's sports like wrestling and stuff like that. And he was making an argument that you can use Title IX to actually argue for keeping men's sports as well, that it's, gender equity just wasn't talk about women's sports.
I've thought about that as a matter of fact, because it's not sex discrimination against women, it's sex discrimination.
Yeah.
So theoretically, he's correct on that, I'm chairing a work group at the University of Maryland right now on Title IX, total sexual misconduct, so I'm learning a lot about it, but I think technically that's correct. That's an interesting, I have to talk to Arthur about. I think it's an interesting angle to protect men's sports.
Mhm.
So that way you kind of box the school. If the school says, I can't cut men's sports and I can't cut women's sports, so.
But if I pay all the money to football players, I have to also pay it across women's sports as well.
And maybe even, that's a very
No
interesting.
more men.
Yeah, it was.
No, Arthur is very.
If you do that, that you're actually discriminating against the men if you take their compensation and give it to somebody
Yeah,
else.
that's his point.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting.
I didn't realize that.
So anybody else have any,
When it comes to that, that's where I was trying to think of like some of the substantial like proportionality elements of Title IX. I wonder if you could argue that if football can be shown to generate 95% of the revenue, if you give an equal proportional amount of revenue generated by other sports back to them, could it meet elements of Title IX in certain ways?
I'm not sure I get your point. So if football is making 95%.
It doesn't mean that you have to give them 95%, but if basketball generates 20% of revenue and football generates 70%, can you give them revenue distributions that are equal to 70% to 20% to 10% relative to the revenue that they generate?
I would think that's the model. I mean, if basketball and men's football say are generating 100% of the TV, let's say that's $1 million. I would think you have to do $1 million for the women. That's really, is that what you're asking?
I was trying to think if there's a way to give less across other sports that are non-revenue generating sports, even in other ways that aren't.
I don't know, Title IX applies to, it's a powerful force, it's a huge. I mean, we had yesterday a 2-hour meeting at our board of regents meeting on Title IX, just sexual discrimination. That's not even all of it. I mean, you go into college, the athletes and all that, we just dealt with the sexual discrimination. It's so very complicated. I mean, the federal government is really, but it's actually, look what it's done for women's sports.
Yes, that's true. It's been a force for good.
As a practical matter, aren't the revenue generating sports, subsidizing every other sport within the,
They are.
yeah. So I mean, it's one of those things that.
There's a real juxtaposition between civil rights, because you've got a lot of African-American athletes, basketball, football. And you have sort of this tension between Title IX, which is a sort of a non-discrimination law, and football and basketball players sort of being discriminated against because they're making the system all this money, we're not getting their fair share. So it is a conflicting duality, but I would say that I think Title IX trumps everything. It's a very powerful force, that's all.
Anyone have questions online or in person? Okay, well, that was actually inspiring in many ways, because to know that stuff is going on the Hill is exciting, because we didn't know. I mean,
It may not happen right away, but they are working on it. And I think, as I said, the pressure is being applied by these court cases. But the House case is so significant that, if you take 4 billion, who knows what the Title IX consequences? Very significant amounts of money for Maryland. It's like $10 million, could be more than that. And then if they try to set the table going forward, how will that play out? Because if somehow the plaintiffs win the House case, 4 billion, the system's going to want to make, the system's then going to have to adjust to rev share with television and all that. So it has a very forward-looking thing, unless Congress trumps it. That's
But as a practical matter, the House case will only affect certain student athletes or former student athletes.
That's what I'm trying to tell you, is that it won't. So if you've already been hit with an antitrust case going backwards that was based on an imputation of television revenue.
Sure.
You're going to have to go forward. In other words, if they buy into a model and the damages are based on 10% or whatever.
Does the House case actually say all student athletes or former student athletes throughout the United States, or is it just the plaintiff's cases? That's what I was.
No, it's just right now the case is basketball.
Right, so there will have to be subsequent lawsuits for it to be enforced across the board.
Well, first of all, basketball players, football players are really the major revenue players.
Sure.
And secondly, if you try to set up a system going forward, damn well be sure that Title IX.
Oh, absolutely.
So that's why it would open up to a much larger forward-looking settlement. But that's why I think House could be a retroactive settlement, and I think that Congress may have to set the table going forward. And that may be a pressure for them, because the House case starts next January, so.
No, and that was the point I was making, that yes, it's dealing with retroactive payments for that set of plaintiffs.
Right.
And not necessarily proactively for everybody else.
That's right.
Sorry.
but they'll be careful because of
Yeah.
it, and it'll
Yeah.
change everything. Okay. Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
That was wonderful. Thank you. Thank you.
You did it. You closed us up.
I hope I
And you can join us in person.
confused it.
Yes,
Yeah, I wasn't
wonderful.
sure I was gonna get out of that meeting, but we were
So-
Title IX held, so.
So quick check-in with the rest of the group. How are people feeling, questions about things? I know I had my mind blown multiple times.
Look forward to getting a lot of the slides and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm gonna send out well, I think, the recordings of the morning are on the Texas A&M computer, so I'm working on that. We're gonna get the PowerPoints from whoever will share them. And
Ron sent me a copy of his article.
perfect,
So,
okay, I'll get that. Now.
It's a great deal that you came in here in person.
Questions for you guys.
It really does.
Yeah, let's
It's hard to
talk.
do it.
Yeah. And what's
Oh,
number?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've got 3 questions for you guys. Number 1, we've just been Division 1 focused. But these issues we're talking about are probably more Division 1, the money issues. But the sports gambling, the health and welfare, of course, are Division 2 and 3 as well. Should we reach out to all colleges?
So sitting in the Drake meeting yesterday, we're hearing statistics about 1 in 10 student athletes is going to be homeless at some point.
Food insecurity.
A huge wake up call.
Yeah.
So I
Because
was,
of the transfer portal?
no,
Are you referring, are really homeless?
really homeless.
Housing insecure, that
Housing
includes couch
insecure.
surfing and.
So I would put it to you that it's really, really negligent on our part to focus on Division 1 athletes only and restrict our efforts, our work to that group when we could open and address all athletes in all realms. I don't think it's
Got it.
okay
Do people
to stay
agree?
division.
I agree.
Okay,
I'll go ahead.
wow.
Special on
I agree,
yeah.
California too. I saw in South Carolina, San Francisco, where a lot of the junior college athletes couldn't even.
Yes, thank you so much, Tom. That was wonderful.
Good to see you guys
Yeah,
again.
thank
I can
you.
be, it's Tom at lead 1A if you ever want to reach me. One.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Second question, we're working on a gambling white paper. We have much more information
Thank you.
now. I won't call it gambling, I'll call it sports betting. What do you guys think?
Start that white.
We did, we got the AI. Who did the, you did, Dan did the AI paper. How about I add to it and I send it back to you, Dan, and then you can,
Yeah, and one of the things, so if you haven't used AI yet, I do recommend it because,
For what purpose?
well, you can use it for lots of different things. But you have to be careful about it. It's garbage in, garbage out.
All right.
And so if you learn how to give it the correct prompts
Mhm.
and put the correct terms in there,
So,
it could be very,
so in
very
teaching
good.
law, I have to teach what you can and cannot do with AI. And I'm on the university's AI task force where we're just doing unbelievable things. So that's when I said, in what respect, it's because there's so many different applications. There's even applications for sports gambling.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, even like a simple question like, or statement like, not gonna word it right, but, tell me the top 5 themes in the research literature on gambling.
Yes.
That's, just even telling it that is very helpful. It gives you a starting place.
And you need to tweak whatever you get to, and also verify the accuracy.
Yes.
But it does give you good language, gives you
references.
a start, references, yes, but you need to tweak it and check for accuracy.
Now, the way you can check for accuracy is interesting. You ask it to summarize the main points of that article. Is kind of the first check to make sure that it's matching up. So, I mean, there's steps you could take to use it ethically, right? That's what we're talking about, to use it as.
Okay, so good. I'll take the first shot at that in some minutes from the meeting here, get everything together. And then I'm gonna hand it all off to you. And anyway, next question, is there anything we need to survey our membership about? Now, Drake Group would like us to survey, I forgot exactly what their question was, but if we're not surveying, then we're not gonna survey and ask their question.
What was the question? What was Drake?
What's her name?
Donna?
Donna.
No.
I would like to survey our members on sports betting. about what they're doing on their campuses.
Yeah, that would probably send a good signal.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Oh, percent of classes missed. Do you have a COIA survey group, reps from multiple institutions that you can get faculty opinions on the following two questions? Athletics teams have many contests away that require travel resulting in missed classes. If there was a national rule limiting classes missed, rank order preference, 10%, 15%, 20%. Good question.
I can tell you that the VARs of the SEC just had that discussion a few weeks ago, and there was no agreement
consensus.
as to what, like a
That's
SEC policy on
difficult. That's
that.
very
Yeah.
difficult.
It is.
The second question is students
Can I-
should not.
Can I pipe in on that scheduling thing? Because we were just talking about that in our athletic council at LSU. And we were changing our guidelines. In one area of our guidelines, it says the NCAA, the NCAA and the SEC scheduled events, including the SEC challenge events, are exempt from all scheduling exemptions because the school doesn't control it. But says for competition and events that are not scheduled by the SEC and or NCAA, the Athletics Council will review and provide feedback to academic affairs for competition travel issues that are not in standard compliance with published university guidelines. They were trying to get away from the 20% being mentioned in the guideline.
So is this something we should survey our membership about? It's,
I think it's a good idea if we're getting away from it in regulations.
I think it could be worth asking about attendance policies broadly, not just like a standardized policy, but if they might have attendance policies and if they have attendance policies that differ for student athletes. I know at least one very well-funded university requires any student athlete, miss class to have to be approved by the athletic council. It's a rule of the university president.
what else should we survey about? Go ahead.
The reason I think they were trying to get rid of this 20% thing is because a lot of times now, a lot of the student athletes are taking online classes. Plus the FAR can give a test, a proctored test to a person if necessary. So there's a lot of ways to deal with them missing a class.
Asynchronous learning.
Yeah.
Other questions? Sports gambling?
Sports gambling.
What about it?
That's a good.
Before the gambling thing, to that last comment about asynchronous learning, you could ask if anybody's interested, whether there are policies on how many asynchronous courses that student athletes can take. But I don't know if people are interested in that, because I know some universities do have policies on that.
Yeah, well, I know, I don't think it's specifically asynchronous, but Ole Miss policy is they can only take one online course a term, period.
For athletes.
For athletes,
for
athletes can only take one online course.
Oh, but other people can take more.
Yeah.
That's interesting. That's a double standard right there.
It is, yeah.
Hop in there, Andrew.
Yeah, my question might go back to some of the things we talked about earlier this morning, but I would actually be curious if we could ask our membership about what majors the transfer athletes are going into.
Oh,
That's a
yeah.
good question.
Integrated studies.
Good question.
Actually, that's on my list of topics.
Yeah, that's show me.
All right, and then what about sports gambling? Do we want to know?
Yes.
Well, what about it?
Do they have a policy?
Everyone, I have to get moving to catch my.
Okay.
Take care.
Bye, Dan.
Safe travel.
Hey, where are you gonna go to the airport?
I'm
Which one?
walking over and catching the train.
Okay.
Which airport though? You
Well,
go?
it's on-
Oh, you're catching the train.
DCA, whatever.
What's
Yeah.
it, 7 o'clock?
You gotta go too. You gotta go too.
No, in the morning.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So Randy.
I was just asking to see if you.
My
could
last
try to
question.
get-
Oh, that's what, yeah.
Yeah.
So which one are you going?
Last question. Okay, so we have
Randy, which one are you going?
I'll just
DCA.
get a Uber and take.
You going to DCA too? Oh, you guys should go together.
Yeah.
Well, they're do, yeah.
Okay, last question. We have one empty spot on our steering committee, and then I am now almost officially the past president, so my spot is open too. We have 2 resumes of these 2 gentlemen right here. I will ask for a vote of everybody, but I would chances are we'll get more votes right here in the room than we do from all the colleges partners. So,
I've got to vote for James.
all right, let's
I-
do it one at a time. James, vote. I vote aye.
Aye.
And Andrew, Scott, Michael, Chris.
Scott says aye.
Oh, we got a thumbs up over here, Michael.
Sorry, I should have voted for you. Just
All right. No, no, no.
I've got a
We have
conflict
two.
of
No,
interest.
we have two spots. We have two resumes. Okay, so now, is it DJ? DJ. I vote yes for DJ.
Aye.
Okay,
Welcome, both of you.
All right.
okay, I'm excited. All right.
Ryan,
Now people can leave. I'll write this stuff up. I'm gonna give you all of these, and I think our meeting is closed.
I would just like to say that we appreciate Kelly's leadership on last year.
Yes. Great job, Kelly.
Oh, well, this was easy because Texas A&M is so nice.
Right. I would like
Yeah.
to-
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, when do I take over chair? In August? Is that when? Right now. Well, who's the vice chair then?
Good. Oh, we need to elect a vice chair. Okay, well.
Dennis.
Do that at our next steering committee meeting.
Because we've officially closed.
Thanks for everything, folks.
All right.
Kelly, there's actually another question.
Yeah.
We're asking questions.
Yeah, yeah.
Good to meet you.
Ask our members if there's any majors athletes can't take.
Oh, yes, this is one we've been struggling with for years.
Take care.
Take care. Good to see you. Let's stop by my office.
we had that conversation.
Either way, I'll stop by yours.
Love to catch up. But so the question
Yeah, that's.
that I want to ask this year is, can you show me how many student athletes we have by major, like in my school? And if we need, if I can do it by major or something, is there a way to do that? And then I want to know, can you show me what it looks like 10 years?
Yeah. Well, and I know with ours, right now, the answer is no, but we're one of our nursing programs is moving to our campus, and that may cause some issues because of their intense internships. But we've been having athletes have been social work majors and I've had internships. So,
Kelly, are we gonna do minutes,
Good question.
written minutes?
Said you made notes. Oh, Francie takes really good notes. So yes. We
Oh,
will.
and if you saved it, the Zoom to the cloud, it'll have a transcript.
Well, okay, so Joan has the second half of the Zoom and Texas A&M has the first half. So I've got to get it off of the computer.
We've done that really.
Long.
I forgot, I think a student, told me.
Yeah.
I had no idea about it. Oh, you know, you can do this.
Yeah.
My students be teaching me a lot of things.
Yeah.
Anybody want a drink? We've got drinks left over, maybe chips, cookies left over.
Who's around for dinner?
1, 2, 3, 5. All right. I don't think that place is still there around the corner.
The African place?
Yeah, the
Yeah,
African,
place.
it was like.
Oh, yeah. That was
I don't think it's there because I kind of looked online and it didn't look like it, but anyway.
All right, well, I'll eat anywhere, so if you guys decide where you're going,
You're
just tell me,
easy, huh?
tell me and I'll show up.
All right.
There's a good Italian place not far from there, around the corner. It's like, you know, on the street, Black Lives Matter Street.
Oh, yeah, I could have done that.
There's a good Italian place over there I went to once.
Yeah, I would be up for that.
All right,
You know what it's called?
let's see. Anybody want University of Hawaii pens? I did notice you had a lot of them. Yes, I do. Oh, you have,
Two of them.
good. Okay, so thank you guys. Do we need any? Dan can set up the next meeting. He's so good at that. I don't know how he does it so well. Oh. Right, let me. All right, Joan and Andrew, anything else?
Nope. Just let me know what I can do on the A&M side of things.
All right, I am gonna have someone here to help me download from the computer, but I will do that now or something. Bye.
Andrew, thank you for the facility.
Don't thank me. I mean, we're lucky that it's still kind of unknown for most people at A&M, so.
Go ahead.
Thanks. I missed you and Dawn today, but thank you for this facility. It was great.
And according to Batista, they may have to sell it to pay for the athletic department debt.
Yeah, that's true. 20 million? That's crazy.
Oh, this was probably now.
Take care, folks.